Good morning. Welcome back to my garden. My name is Becky. If you're new, and today, look what I have. I have the harvest basket out. Today is going to be the first major harvest of the year. And so we're going to harvest all of the garlic scapes today. I'm going to show you how we're going to bring those inside and preserve them. We're also going to harvest a ton of herbs to preserve that we can use all winter. And I'm going to be planting my sweet potato slips out today and some more pinto bean, pole beans, because some of them didn't survive. So I'm just going to set these sweet potato slips here. We're going to plant these after we go harvest our garlic scapes. I think we'll be able to harvest a really big bouquet of flowers as well today. And here is the garlic patch or the garlic bed. Now, if you aren't sure what garlic scapes are, I can see them in this jungle. This right here is the garlic scape, and if we left this on the hardneck garlic plant, it would produce a flower. And you can go ahead and harvest these scapes and eat them. There's a couple reasons why you want to harvest your garlic scapes. One is you don't want your garlic plant to put the energy into producing a flower. You want the garlic plant putting all its energy into creating a really big head of garlic. So by harvesting the scapes, we're stopping the plant from putting its energy into producing a flower, and we're telling it to put its energy into producing a big head of garlic. Another benefit of harvesting them is they have a very delicious garlic flavor. And so when you plant hardneck garlic varieties, you get more garlic product for the price of one plant. So you're gonna see just how much garlic we're gonna be able to produce, preserve, and enjoy in our cooking throughout this cooking year because I planted a lot of hardneck garlic bulbs. You don't get the scapes from soft neck garlic because they don't produce this hardneck that produces the flower. But you can't braid hardneck garlic, so if you wanted to braid your garlic, it's best to plant soft neck garlic varieties. Hardneck garlic varieties also do not have as long of a shelf life as soft neck garlic, so that might be why you would want to plant soft neck garlic. I think that's all of them, but rest assured, I'm sure I missed a couple in there. I'll find them when I come out next time. I can't quite believe it that we are already at the point where we are having harvest. It feels like it took forever to get here, but it also feels like it didn't take very much time at all. So now let's move on to our second harvest, and that is going to be over here. This is my green bean and dahlia bed, and along this edge I planted a ton of cilantro, and it's doing fantastic. This is the second bed that I planted cilantro in on the same day. And this bed, it didn't do quite as well, but we still have quite a bit we can harvest. My goal is going to be to try to have fresh cilantro all growing season. I was able to accomplish that last year. It normally doesn't like to grow in the heat, so that's why I planted it on the north side of each bed, so that when hopefully these plants get a lot bigger, then they will shade out the cilantro so it can keep growing in a cooler environment. Another way I'm trying to ensure that I get a long harvest of cilantro is in that bed right there. About 3 weeks after I planted this cilantro, I planted another planting of it. And today I plan to plant another planting of it. So not only we can get cilantro from hopefully these plants all year, but if they end up bolting, which means going to seed and becoming bitter, I can rely on my other plantings for fresh cilantro. All of this is going to be preserved to use throughout the winter. You all have seen how much fresh cilantro I cook with. I don't think I can grow a year's worth myself, but I can certainly grow enough to enjoy throughout the summer if I can get it from bolting on me. Okay, so that is one really large colander of cilantro. So our 2 big harvests that are in the main garden are done. We are going to harvest quite a bit off one of the green stalks to preserve. But now what I would like to do is go and plant the sweet potatoes. Officially, 2024 sweet potatoes are planted. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. I have only tried growing sweet potatoes one other time, and it was a dismal disaster. I tried growing them in straw bales, and straw bales, if you want to garden in them, there's a whole charging process and getting them ready to garden in, and I didn't understand that, so I just plopped my slips in a straw bale and nothing came of it. So this is going to be fun to see if we can get any sort of sweet potato harvest. I love sweet potatoes, and so if we could harvest our own, that would be pretty fantastic. These 9 right here are the slips from my mother-in-law, and then there's radish seeds in between, or radish plants, I should say. And those are actually radish seeds that we had saved last year together, and it looks like we got pretty good germination, so I'm pretty excited about that. So those will be ready well before these sweet potatoes are going to be ready to harvest. And then these 9 sweet potato plants right here that just look like sticks, those are the ones I got from Johnny's Seed. I completely forgot I ordered those because I think I ordered them back in January when I started trying to grow out my own sweet potato slips. And when nothing was happening, I just clicked order, and you mark when you want them to come. And I completely forgot that I ordered them. So they showed up at my door, and I was like, what are these? And they were sweet potatoes, and they had no roots growing on them at that point. And then I stuck them in water. I rooted them out for about a week, and then we just planted them, and we'll see what happens. Now, I was thinking about going ahead and plopping in a few more slips over here, but I think I'm just gonna have half this bed dedicated to sweet potatoes because I wanna see how well they do. If they do well, maybe next year I will dedicate some more space to sweet potatoes. Right here we have carrots, and I'm gonna need to thin those out in about a week or 2, but I've got good germination, so I'm gonna keep those here. Here we have some more green beans. Now you can see this poor bed is just, the slugs or some sort of bug is really having a hard time, or my plants are having a hard time with the slugs in this bed. But I'm going to leave those green beans there because I know that we can get green beans and carrots. This right here is carrots. And then that is my only cabbage plant left and some flowers. And then I just saw, this is some new germination on some mini pumpkins, like the little tiny white decorative pumpkins. Here we have some, this is status, I believe, which is a drying flower, and when those are ready to harvest, and my garlic is ready to harvest, the soft neck, I want to take some of that status flower and hopefully braid it into the garlic. So now we've got our sweet potatoes for 2024 planted. I think what I'm going to do before I head inside, because it's still nice and cool out here and I want to be out here while it's cool, is I need to do some maintenance on my tomato plants, and then we'll run inside and start preserving our harvest today. And we'll go ahead and harvest a bouquet right before we go inside. So my tomatoes are planted along the back side of this bed, and they need to be kind of trimmed up and pruned up a little bit. You can see they're a little overgrown here. Now, a lot of gardeners are heavy pruners on their tomato plants, and they basically leave one stalk in the center and they grow that up and they prune off all the other suckers. I don't do that because we live in a relatively dry climate. typically from June until September, we might only get rain a couple times a year. So we're very, very dry. We're not humid. So I can afford to leave quite a bit of suckers on my plants. I can let these get pretty bushy, and I don't have to worry about disease as much as some of you all that live in a more humid climate, where keeping too much foliage on your tomatoes could result in quite a bit of disease. And so it is advantageous to prune heavily your tomato plants so they have better airflow and they can dry out a little bit better. But for me, I like to leave quite a few suckers on because I have noticed over the years that if I prune too many suckers, I do reduce the amount of harvest I get. So here I just cut all this off my tomato plant, and now I've got a less bushy tomato. So I'm gonna do this on all my tomatoes. I am pruning some of the suckers, but not all of them. And I'm pruning the majority of the bottom stems that are touching. I don't want any of the stems actually to touch the ground, because that can cause disease from the soil splashing up onto my tomato plant. I'm gonna leave this sucker on and let this grow, and that's what that looks like. I'm not gonna do any pruning on my tomatillos, and I've got 4 more tomato plants here. So what I'm kind of looking for in my tomato pruning process is just to guide the tomato plant to grow in a way I want. So I did just cut that sucker off that was pointing away from the trellis, because it's gonna be harder for me to trellis that up. I'm cutting away almost all of the lower branches, and I'm gonna leave, so on this one, here's the main stem right here. Anything that's coming out at a 45-degree angle from that main stem is considered a sucker. And I'm gonna leave 1, 2, 3 of those on this tomato plant. And actually, I'm gonna take this bottom one off. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. So first bed is done. I'm gonna head over to the second bed. I only have 2 beds where I'm going to do this kind of heavy pruning on. And I'm only really doing it to my indeterminate varieties of tomatoes. I do not do any sucker pruning at all on my determinate varieties of tomatoes. Well, that felt like it took absolutely no time at all because I only had those 2 beds to do. Now I am gonna do some pruning on my Roma tomato plants, but I'm gonna do absolutely no pruning on suckers. The only branches I'm gonna prune on my Roma tomato plants are actual branches that are not fruit producing. So this was the bed we were just in, which you can't really see the tomato plants that well because the snapdragons are in its way. And this is my Roma tomato bed. So these are a determinate variety of tomato, which means these tomato plants only get to a determined size. And they put 1 big flush of fruit out at once. And so you do not want to take any of the suckers off these plants, which are any of the branches growing at a 45-degree angle. But I do want to trim some of the branches that are touching the ground. I don't want any leaves touching the ground if I can avoid it. So I'm just going to go through and trim some of the branches just like that. We need to put tomato cages around these pretty soon, but not today. So here you can see on this plant, there's quite a few branches where leaves are touching the ground. I'm going to go through and get this trimmed up. Last year I had, I think, almost 60 tomato plants. This year I have about half of that, so it's taking half the time to prune. This is my other bed. Let's go ahead and harvest a beautiful bouquet. So I have some pink snapdragons that are ready. I have white snapdragons that are ready, and I have orange snapdragons, and I also have ranunculus. So I think I'm gonna start with these white ones. I haven't harvested any white snapdragons yet this year. I'm just gonna pull the bottom leaves off, and I'm gonna put those just directly in the bed to compost in place. This one. The sun just came out, so it's perfect timing to get all these goodies inside and take care of them. Here is the first big harvest of the year. I cannot believe we're already at this point. It feels like it's been forever, yet it came really quickly. And look at all these flowers. This is not even a quarter of what I could have harvested out of the garden. So first thing what I want to do is take care of this cilantro and get this ready to preserve. The first thing I need to grab is my salad spinner so we can wash this and preserve it. The way I'm gonna preserve it this year is freeze drying it. I've had the absolute best success harvesting and preserving cilantro in the freeze dryer. I've tried drying it just in my food dehydrator, and it kind of turns out a little brown. It doesn't hold its color and its flavor the same way it does when I freeze dry it. So I'm gonna freeze dry this. I wanna give it a good wash, and I want it to go into the freeze dryer as dry as possible. So I'm gonna use my salad spinner. I don't want to overfill my salad spinner, so I'm going to do this in a bunch of batches. And as they are done salad spinning, I want to put them on a clean dishcloth. And I'm actually going to pat them dry and let them kind of air dry a little bit on a towel on my counter. I'm just going to grab a bunch of towels out. And I'm not gonna cut all the stems off this cilantro. It's so young and tender, it's gonna have delicious cilantro flavor. And so I'm not worried about picking each small individual leaf off these stems. If these were big, woody stems, I would take the time to do that. I'll show you what I mean by that when we harvest some of the parsley that's out there. But before I get to the parsley, I wanted to get this washed and drying because I had harvested it a bit ago. Oh, it smells so good. Cilantro is probably one of my favorite herbs of all time. One thing that's really exciting is I'm going to be able to make homemade salsa and salsa verde using this homegrown cilantro, even if my cilantro out in my garden bolts. When the tomatoes come in and when the tomatillos come in, I could just pull this freeze-dried cilantro out and use it. A lot of times by the time the tomatoes are ripe and the tomatillos are ripe, a lot of the cilantro has already bolted on me. I was reading in Crystal's book, Freeze Fresh, which is my new preservation book on freezing fresh things. She does talk about freezing cilantro, but she says that it's best to use, if it's frozen, to use it in cooked dishes. And a lot of the ways that I like to use my cilantro is fresh. And so I was thinking about maybe freezing some of it, but I think this first round I'm gonna freeze dry so that I can use it in fresh applications like pico de gallo and fresh salsas and different dressings and things that I wanna make. But I do wanna try freezing it as well. Maybe that'll be the next harvest I'll do. And I'll use that in frozen applications. And we can see how that goes together. Okay, so this is the last of the cilantro now washed and spinned. So the next thing we're gonna do is go ahead and wash up the garlic scapes. I'm just gonna let these dry on these towels for a little bit while we move on to these. So before we do anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and get the freeze dryer started because it takes a good I'm just closing the valve, 15 minutes for the freeze dryer to cool down. And we need it cool before we can put anything into it. So while that's cooling, we'll start processing some of our goodies. Now, I am going to freeze my garlic scapes. I could freeze dry these garlic scapes, or I could even dehydrate them in my dehydrator. I have done that before, and break it down into garlic powder. But I'm gonna use my freeze dryer for my cilantro because I know I want that cilantro freeze dried. And the garlic scapes, I love using frozen garlic in my cooking. And so I'm gonna go ahead and just freeze it because that is a way I can get it done super quickly, super easily, and I know it's a way that I like to cook with it. So all I'm gonna grab out here is my high-powered blender, or should I use my food processor? Let's see, I think I'm gonna use my food processor. And I'm gonna process this just like I do when I process garlic. Now there's a lot of different things you can do with garlic scapes. A lot of people like to ferment them, a lot of people like to pickle them, and a lot of people like to turn it into garlic pesto. To me, it has a very strong garlic flavor. A lot of people say it's a very mild garlic flavor. I find it's a very strong garlic flavor. So I process it just like I would normal garlic, and I use it just like I would normal garlic. If you've never tried garlic scapes before and you want to, now would be the time to run to your local farmer's market and see if a local farmer is selling them. It's very rare you see these in the grocery store because the growing season on these is super short. You only get about a 2-week window typically of harvest of garlic scapes. And most commercial garlic farmers don't grow hardneck varieties. Hardneck varieties are the only ones that are gonna give you scapes because they don't have a very long shelf life compared to soft neck garlic varieties. Depending on if you have like perfect conditions, you might be able to push that a little bit longer. Soft neck varieties of garlic can last for a year if you store them properly. And that's why most commercial garlic farmers grow soft neck varieties. So that's why also garlic scapes aren't going to be something you see at the store very often, because most commercial farmers don't grow hard neck varieties, but a lot of local farmers grow hard neck varieties. And so in the springtime, you can typically find garlic scapes, or I can at my farmer's market around this time of year, but only for about a 2-week window, and then they're done. The first time I ever had garlic scapes, I was a part of a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, so I became a member of a farm before I had my own garden. And once a week, I would pick up a box of produce from this farm. And they had a big bag of probably 10 garlic scapes in it. And I put about 6 of those in a quiche. And that quiche was almost it basically wasn't edible, because the garlic flavor in these is so strong to me that it was like I had put like 3 heads of garlic in one quiche. And that's when I learned this is my favorite way to preserve it, because to me it has a big, nice, strong garlic flavor. I don't really like to use it in, because a lot of people will put these in stir fries and things like that, but to me a little goes a long way. So that was the first time I ever had garlic scapes. And ever since then, I've been just preserving them and using them like I would garlic, instead of using them like a vegetable, which you can. Now, garlic scapes are definitely more fibrous than regular garlic, so it does take a little bit more to get it into a paste. So I'm just going to run my knife along the edge to release it, and then I am going to put a little bit of oil in here just so that it'll be easier to make these into little garlic puffs. I'm going to do this just like I would with regular garlic. I'm going to take my small cookie scoop, whoop, and put them into little pucks. All right, this is done. Get this over here. Here we go. So here is 2024's garlic scape harvest going into the freezer. And this is a lot of garlic. That is one of the benefits of hard neck garlic, is you really get 2 harvests in the amount of space you would normally just have 1 if you planted soft neck garlic. So what I'm gonna do is just pop this in the freezer, just like this. Freeze this for probably 2 hours, 3 hours, and then I'm gonna double bag it in 2 Ziploc bags, just like I do when I freeze just regular garlic in these little discs, so that we can use them in our cooking. I do double bag to help prevent any sort of garlic flavor getting into my freezer. So while I was working on the garlic scapes, I was thinking about this beautiful cilantro, and I'm gonna go ahead and follow Crystal's, let me get her book, freezing method in her book, Freeze Fresh, which I can link down below for you. And she just says to wash it, dry it really well, chop it up, and freeze it, and then cook with it from frozen. Do not thaw it first, just take it out of the freezer and cook with it. And I'm just gonna do a little bit of that to experiment with this, and then the majority of it I'm gonna go ahead and freeze dry, which I've got 2 trays here and 3 trays here. I have found when freeze drying cilantro, it's easiest for me if I freeze dry these really, really tender plants, then I can freeze dry the stems too, and I can freeze dry it whole just like this. And then when it comes out of the freeze dryer, nice and dry, I will chop it up and then put it into a container chopped up. But I don't chop it before I freeze dry it. Now the reason I want to freeze some and not just freeze dry it, even though I know I love freeze drying it, is it's always good to experiment with new preservation methods to see if you find one you like better. The reason I do this is because I love food and I love growing my own food, and I want to make sure that when I go through the effort of preserving it, to use it throughout the year when it's not, you know, fresh, that I can just pick it out of my garden, because my goal is to try to eat this fresh as much as possible and then enjoy the preserved stuff for when it's not in season. But I do want to make sure that my efforts are worth it and that I preserve it in a way that I like it. And so that's why I like to experiment with new ways, because I might find a new way I like better. And I know not everyone has a freeze dryer, and most of us have a freezer. So it's gonna be fun just to experiment and see, because I know I like frozen garlic better. I use it more when it's frozen as opposed to when it's freeze dried. So maybe I'll feel the same way about cilantro, but I won't know unless I try. And I have a lot here. I have more than I think that will fit in my freeze dryer, which is fine, because I can just put a bunch of it in my refrigerator too, and we can have nice washed, fresh cilantro for cooking this week. I have not menu planned. It's Monday, and I have not done any menu planning. All I know is that this week I'm gonna cook for Josh's mom and her husband this week. That's all I know, but do I know what I'm cooking? Not yet. So maybe I'll have to pick something with cilantro, I don't know. Okay, so this is my 5 trays full. 5 trays here. Let's see if I can put a little bit more. You don't want to overstuff your freeze dryer, but because cilantro is so tender and small, it doesn't take a lot to kind of puff up. I think it's okay if I, stuff the freeze dryer a little bit more, because it's not something that's super dense like an apple. So I think I'm gonna call this good, and it should be ready. Let's see. Yeah, I think I can stack these. The freeze dryer should be ready. We can load these up into the freeze dryer. Now, cilantro and fresh herbs freeze dries so quickly. So this isn't gonna take very long. Well, I mean, it'll still probably take like 12 to 20 hours, but not compared to, say, something that was really dense that could take 36 hours. It says load trays into the freeze dryer. I already closed my drain valve, so now I'm just gonna hit. So now for the rest of this cilantro, I'm gonna go ahead and chop this up, because if I wanna use this in something, I'm going to want it chopped up. Now with the freeze dryer, when you're freeze drying things, you can actually pre-freeze things to save on your freeze dryer time. But because the cilantro is so thin, it's not gonna take very long for the machine to freeze it. So I'm just gonna freeze it and freeze dry it all at once. But a lot of times when I use my freeze dryer, I will actually pre-freeze it and then throw it in the freeze dryer. So the freeze dryer doesn't have to freeze and then freeze dry it. It can just freeze dry it. Now, one thing Crystal says in her book is that you want your herbs to be as dry as possible. So I'm just kind of massaging them, fluffing them, and drying them. And I was going to harvest a bunch of other herbs and throw those in the freeze dryer as well, but I didn't realize how full my freeze dryer was gonna be with just this cilantro, so I'll probably grab those herbs on a different day. But the rest of the herbs out there, they're not as heat sensitive, so I'm not worried about them bolting on me. I think I'm gonna take half this and just put half of this in my refrigerator, and I'm gonna use this in my cooking this week. And now I have pre-washed cilantro ready to go. And then for the stuff that I'm gonna freeze, I'm just gonna give it a nice little chop. 2024. And we're gonna get this in this bag. All right, cilantro going in the freezer. I'm excited to see how this goes. So we have our preservation projects done. I want to go ahead and make these into a bouquet, and then we need to go plant some more plants. Look how pretty these are. I cannot believe it. And the stem length on these snapdragons, this is a quart jar. Normally I put all of my flowers in pints, so I am pretty proud of myself to get this stem length on my snapdragons. So I want to get a different jar because this is the jar that I had my sweet potato slips in, and I could use a cleaner jar. So I just got a fresh jar with clean water, and I do think it's kind of pretty having the white on one side and the orange on another, but if I want to incorporate these ranunculus, I think I want it a little bit more random, and I'm pretty happy with the majority of the length that I have on these. See, the stem length on this one is pretty small. That one I actually might not be able to use. And last year is when I figured out that it is best to try to remove most of the foliage out in the garden instead of bringing it in and having to then bring it back out later. If you just leave it in the garden bed to compost in place, it's less work when you come inside to make your bouquet. Look at that. That is so incredibly beautiful. I never in a million years would have thought that I would be able to grow something this beautiful. Both of these snapdragon varieties are snapdragon varieties that I got from M.I. Gardener. It is orange wonder and just a white snapdragon. And then I have obviously the pink and orange ranunculus. So that is so incredibly beautiful. I think I'm just gonna put this right here. Here's the reality of what my kitchen looks like. So I'm gonna take a second and go ahead and clean it. I do wanna run out into the garden and plant a few more seeds, but I think I will be disappointed if I walk back into this kitchen in the state it is. So let me get this cleaned up. I wrapped up my cilantro in this towel. I don't have paper towels in my kitchen right now. I find that the best way to keep cilantro and parsley, any fresh herb, and even lettuce fresh for up to 2 weeks in my fridge, well, maybe a week and a half, is to wrap it up. Usually I use a paper towel, but I'm just gonna use this towel because I'll cook with this in the next probably 2 days, and I'm gonna put it in a bag. I'll reuse this bag, and I'm just gonna put this in the fridge. And I'm gonna get this counter clean. I think I'm gonna pull out a freezer meal tonight for dinner because I know I need to get some work done this afternoon. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean this off, and then we'll pick something we're gonna have for dinner tonight where I won't have to do any major cooking. So once I get the kitchen clean from this little preservation projects we did today, the kitchen will be clean and I won't have to worry about messing it up again. Counter's clean. We'll get this in the dishwasher. I think I'm gonna put this right there. So this is what the state of the freezer is looking like for freezer meals. These are some of the ones we just made last week together. And I think what I'm gonna pull out, because we had grilled chicken twice over the weekend, I'm gonna pull out one of these This is chicken Alfredo lasagna. I'm just gonna set this here to thaw for a couple hours, and then I'll pop it into the fridge until I'm ready to bake it tonight. The last thing I wanna do before I call my kind of outside projects done for the day is I wanna go get more cilantro planted. This is cilantro that I grew last year that I let go to seed, and I just cut it off, put it in this bag, let it dry, and we're gonna plant these. I've already planted these and they've started to grow. I just want another succession of it. Sorry, the loud noise is the freeze dryer. I can't turn that off, but I just have 2 more things I'm gonna grab real quick. My cucumbers that I planted died, so I need to replant cucumbers, and the slugs have been eating some of my jade green beans, so that's jade green beans, I wanna plant a couple more of those. So I just need to find my cucumber seeds, which are right here. This is what I was gonna harvest and freeze dry, but I will just do that a different day. I have tarragon there, we've got more cilantro, and a lot of parsley. Lots and lots of parsley in here, but I don't need to worry about that going to seed. So I'll just harvest that, eat it fresh, and then next time. The freeze dryer is open, because now that harvest has started, I can't believe that we're at this point. The freeze dryer is gonna be running a lot. Okay, so I have to figure out where I'm gonna put these seeds. I'm not exactly sure yet. I'm glad we did the harvesting when we did, because now it's getting kind of toasty out here. So here you can see I did a second succession of cilantro along the zinnia bed. So I'm hoping that the zinnias are gonna grow up and shade out the cilantro throughout the summer. Grab my gloves. Here is where I'm just gonna put a few more seeds where the slugs have kind of eaten down my jade green beans and where I didn't have the best germination. Okay, I'm gonna call that good. Nothing perfect, but done. Now we're gonna plant some cucumber seeds. And I don't really know where I'm gonna be planting this. You know where I'm gonna plant it? I know. I'm going to plant it where I was going to put my sweet potatoes, but then I learned I shouldn't put my sweet potatoes there. This is the Roma bed where we trimmed the Roma plants up. And what I'm gonna do is plant my cucumbers along this side, and I'm gonna let them grow down the side of this bed. We don't eat a ton of cucumbers, so I don't need a ton of plants, but I've had kind of poor luck growing cucumbers this year. Either I planted them out too early and I killed them because they got too cold, and then the slugs have been eating them like crazy. The slugs like the stems or something, I'm not sure. But that's what has been my biggest problem. So I'm gonna plant more than I need so that in the event that some die, I'll hopefully get a couple plants that survive. So I'm just putting a trench along this side of the bed. Now I'm gonna plant some seeds. Gardening is the game of someone who is persistent, because things die and you just gotta keep planting. And then hopefully some things will survive. I'm gonna have way more plants than I need. My chickens like cucumbers, so I can give them the excess and I can gift the excess as well. Okay. So this bed officially now has cucumbers along this edge. So I think what I'm gonna do on the back side of this bed is plant my 4th succession. Oh, I already did that. Okay, of cilantro, and it looks like they just germinated. So I've got lots of cilantro plants in here, which I planted these. So I don't need to plant more here. I forgot I did that, so that's good. So I think what I'm gonna do because I would rather have probably more cilantro. I don't need any more cucumbers. If half of those germinate and do anything, that's gonna be more than enough. So I think in this bed, along this edge, even though it's the south side, I'm gonna go ahead and plant more cilantro in this bed. Cilantro is by far my most favorite herb, so I want to try to get a lot of it. So I'm just gonna make a trench along this edge. Oh, there's a carrot. Just gonna let that compost in place. And now I'm gonna take my cilantro seeds and just sprinkle them very heavily in this trench. I have lots of seeds in here. And I'm just gonna sprinkle the soil over the top. Now that I have the cucumbers replanted, I officially have everything, and the sweet potatoes in the ground. I officially have, I don't want that, yeah, that'll work. Every crop in the ground that I want to grow for 2024. I actually like the shower the best. Now I will keep planting in succession, so I will probably plant cilantro a few more times. Once I harvest the garlic bulbs in about a month, I will plant something in its place. I don't know what yet. It's just a matter of succession planting now. So planting more carrots in a month or two to extend the harvest, planting more lettuce, radishes, things like that. And wait for things to get ready to harvest and to start harvesting things. So we are at a very fun point in the garden season. One of my favorite times where we just get to watch things grow, and there are gonna be harvests here and there. And then the craziness is gonna start here not too long. Look at that rainbow, how pretty is that? So friend, I just wanna thank you for taking time yet again out of your day to spend time with me. I hope this was encouraging. I hope that you may have learned something, or you just enjoyed hanging out with me, because I certainly enjoy hanging out with you. And I just don't take it for granted that you take time out of your day to spend time with me in my garden and in my kitchen. The goal is to have fun, learn something along the way, and hopefully get some really yummy, delicious things to eat out of the garden and some really beautiful flowers to look at. And we're definitely on our way to that goal. So if you want to watch more of my videos, I'll pop a couple here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. And I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.